He's getting a table for me. I need to put this, otherwise. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's it. That's good. Yeah.
The big table.
No, no, this is good. Just something put here. Yeah. Perfect. You sure it's not in the car or something? Then you don't have to worry about it. जल्दी आना. Yeah. We should be after the kirtan. Should we share the mic? We can do that. We can do that. No, I mean if he doesn't find it, he'll have to wait and see if it's in the car or something. You know. He can make. Oh, really? That's yeah.
So, but I think it wouldn't disappear in some place.
Yeah, it won't. Here. Where did I put my purse?
So handbag?
Yeah, my purse. It's over there. It's at the last one. Yeah. No, no. Yeah. Who's that?
This is your jacket.
Yeah, I don't think because he never gave it to me, so no, it's not with you. Yeah, yeah, you're fine. It's probably in the car, right? Did you see it with him?
No, no. It's
It's in the car. It's in the car. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, don't worry.
It's somewhere around here. Yes.
No, I don't think so. Just keep it here. Hare Krishna mantra for few minutes.
Okay.
Nice, nice Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Does anyone play mridanga here? Is anyone play mridanga?
Anybody wants to play kanpa?
No one plays mridanga?
Actually, there were one.
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Kunja Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Yashoda Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav, Radhe. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav, Radhe. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav, Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribol, Nitai Gaura Haribol. Nitai Gaura Haribol, Nitai Gaura Haribol. Shri Radha Nila Madhav ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Hare Krishna. So nice to be here in Seattle again. I was here 30 years ago. And I came to the old temple in downtown. I'm sure most of you don't know, haven't been to that area anymore, but I still remember at that time. And it's so wonderful. It's just so wonderful to see such an amazing temple, a majestic temple now, here 30 years later, and the beautiful deities of Nil Madhava and Gaurnitai and Lord Ramchandra and Lakshman and Hanuman. And this is all due to the wonderful efforts of Harilas Maharaj and to his great dedication, because I think I may have come like in 1990, and he came in 1991 and did all these amazing changes here due to his wonderful dedication. So a few of you I already know from past encounters over the phone, and it's so nice to see put a face on it on all of you, and I'm sure you see your face on me also. Yeah. So, but here I am to share with you my experiences in raising children, as well as the experiences of many parents that I've encountered over the years through my seminars. And so basically this seminar will be divided into 3 parts, and it's based on ISKCON's motto that purity is the force, books are the basis, and preaching is the essence. So I don't know how much time it's going to take, but even if we cover only the first part today, then we can cover the remaining 2 tomorrow, okay? So I'm hoping that today we will cover purity as a force, which means building our home environment in a way which is conducive to our children's upbringing. And tomorrow we can cover the academic curriculum, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And that is like the study of Srimad Bhagavatam with our children is the heart of the seminar. So I want to make sure that all of you are here for that part of the seminar. Is everybody planning to come for tomorrow also? Yes? Okay. Just in case we don't do the second part today. I don't know how. And then we are going to open for questions after each section. After purity is a force, we will open it for questions so that everybody gets a chance to ask questions based on those topics, and then we'll move on to the next one. So, so I want to talk a little bit about Prabhupada's vision Prabhupada's vision for the education of our children. I remember when after I started homeschooling my children, then people, and started doing seminars, then people were encouraging me to write about my experiences, in a book. And that's when I started putting down all my experiences, and the outcome was this book, which is really based on Prabhupada's. I made a deep study of what Prabhupada's really vision was. In the beginning, when I started educating my children at home, I really didn't know, other than being inspired by the basic instructions of Srila Prabhupada, how we should raise our children as devotees and all that. And then later on, when I started, writing the book, I really got into it, and I was so amazed how much there was out there. How much Prabhupada had spoken on this topic. Among the 3 things that were very, very dear to Srila Prabhupada, one was book distribution. That was number 1. And then second was deity worship, and the third was Gurukula, education for children. That's how important Prabhupada considered the necessity of training our children properly in Krishna consciousness, So why? Because he said that if we raise a generation of children who are Krishna conscious preachers, that will be the glory of not only the country, but also of our movement, and if we lose even one Vaishnava, that will be a great loss. So, and what Prabhupada envisioned for our children was an education which was based on Vedic education. In other words, the importance of inculcating in our children all the wonderful qualities of a devotee. In other words, today we see in the world, there's people they have money, right? America, have people who have money. They have money and education, but does that necessarily create gentlemen? Do you see people with character, good character? No. These 2 things are not guarantees for good character. But a Vedic education is different, because it teaches us those things. Because we put God in the center, naturally we become more saintly, and we develop qualities that are, very conducive to being happy in this world, right? Even Prabhupada said that even 50 years ago, influential people in India, they sent their children to Gurukula. Just 50 years ago. Why? Because they had no lack materially. I mean, they were rich, they had everything, they could just pass on the business to their children. But what they found necessary was inculcating in the children qualities like self-control, humility, mercy, forgiveness. They found it so important, right? So, and we see that today education is simply meant to increase, to find ways how we can increase our sense enjoyment, accumulation of things. And Vedic education is just the opposite. How we can control those very things that is encouraged today, Prabhupada said that schools have become like slaughterhouses. It used to be a metaphor, now it's a reality, isn't it? It's a reality now. I mean, it is becoming like that when you think about the condition of the schools and, and what they're teaching. Because, Prabhupada said, you don't need to go to school to learn how to eat better or sleep better or mate better or defend better. These things come natural to us. It's innate in us. Does anybody need training how to sleep or defend? No, it's there, right? A baby doesn't need to know where to put the food. It goes straight into the mouth, right? So you don't need training for these things. But we do need training on how to control these things, right? So that's why Prabhupada, when he wanted to establish Gurukulas, the Gurukulas were just meant before children between 5 and 10, 11, 12, like that. It wasn't meant for the whole period of their life. Why those early years were so important to give that character education, right? And then the children, whatever varna or ashram they wanted to follow, they followed. But the idea was to inculcate in them from day one these characteristics, because these are the formula for happiness. But the point is that as times have changed, we don't have too many gurukulas, right? And they are so far away. The ones that we may want to send them, they're not around, right? And plus, we also may not be willing to send them. So what do? If Prabhupada's, it was his dearmost desire to train these children and have gurukulas, then another way to do is to raise them with these based, in a way that would follow the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. In other words, while we give them the education that's given to us outside, of course, it's nice to find an alternative way, if we can, But if that, opening devotee schools, that's a very nice option. Many temples have done that in the past, where you can give a mixture of academics and spiritual education, and it becomes really nice. And many temples have already started that. Or another way is homeschooling, which I tried, But for most people, that's not possible, right? The reality is that's not possible. So what do, right? So we try to raise our children in a way where we can follow these instructions to our best ability, where we try to, and this is what I'm here for, that even though you may not be homeschooling like I did, but we all have this great desire to pass on these values to our children, right? That's why all of you are here, because you want to pass these values to our children, these Krishna conscious children. You are devotees, and you have a great desire to pass these values. So naturally, one has to still, understand those things, which helps us to go in that direction, in spite of the fact that we are sending our children to public schools, right? If you have an alternative, great. Nothing like that, But if you cannot, then at least this is what I'm here for, to try to help you or try to guide you through my own experience of what I did with my children. So, yeah, you can go to the next one. Move on, yeah. Yeah, next one, Prabhu, yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit of my history of, how we were in Boise, 27, 28 years ago. We found ourselves there. My husband got a job there, and it was out in nowhere. There was nothing there. No devotee association, nothing. So I was, I was just like, what am I going to do now? We had been living in Chicago for 5 years, and we had the advantage of a nice temple, and that's where I became a devotee in the 1980s. And so I was missing that part, and I was thinking, okay, I'm stuck. This is what we have to do. And so the best way is to, in order to get association, you have to create association, right? So the best thing was to open a center and invite people and start a program. And believe me, we were very unqualified. We were fairly new devotees, and we just didn't know what we were doing. But yet, praying to Krishna, we started a center there, and at that time, I started when they turned 5 years old. I started thinking about a formal schooling for them, and then I tried the private school for a while, for a couple of years, and I would volunteer and go there to see firsthand what would happen. And frankly, I was very disappointed because it was an expensive private school, and I was thinking, wow, I'm doing the right thing. I'm giving my children good academics. But then what I noticed there and what the children came back to tell me, I was like, a lot of doubts started coming to my mind. And I thought, because I had a great desire to give them this Shastic knowledge to them, to engage them in devotional service. So at that time, I decided I heard about this homeschooling, that people were doing. And I decided, and I was very, very nervous because I was thinking, this is not something I was thinking about. And so, but in America, home education is very, very popular because it's very well established. Most people who are homeschooling, they belong to very wealthy families, they are Christians, and they have that liberty of staying at home, the mothers, they can stay at home. And so they have very developed curriculum that they sell. There's many, many companies who sell curriculum, and you can use these curriculums. They'll assign you a teacher. They'll do lesson plans, daily lesson plans. Everything is provided here. So I thought, well, this is pretty nice. Let me try it for like 3 months, in summer. And if it works, fine. If it doesn't work, I'll give it up because I was really, frankly, very, very nervous. And in 3 months' time, we finished the entire curriculum, and and we weren't studying day and night. We were studying like two hours each, and mostly we were, doing devotion. We had a center, and there was so much going on. My husband was very much into, expanding and doing things and preaching activities and things like that. So I was homeschooling them in that way, and afterwards, I thought, well, this is not good. Let me just do my own curriculum. So I gave up that formal curriculum, and then I started teaching them through Srila Prabhupada's books, and in particular, Srimad Bhagavatam. And what was my day like? Well, I was, we got up in the morning, and that's what I'm going to cover. We had a morning program, and then a full morning program, and then we sat down and we did Srimad Bhagavatam for like 2 hours every day, or maybe sometimes longer, and with some breaks in it. And then we would go out and utilize those instructions in the Bhagavatam in very practical ways. Like we would go and do preaching programs, we'd do festivals and get ready for the festivals, and so many other activities, We'd reach out, to schools and do programs there, book tables, and, we do all kinds of things during the day. So that became our life. And what the children remember growing up is homeschooling being one big play. I don't think if you ever ask them, what did they actually study, they can't remember too much of study. Because everything was just so much fun, Devotional service in different ways was so much fun. And the study was, also Srimad Bhagavatam, which can be very enlivening and inspiring, right? And then, of course, we did math and everything also. So Prabhupada said that he built a house in which everyone could live. In other words, within Krishna consciousness, there's practically everything there, no matter what you're looking to teach your children, if anybody feels like they're going to miss out on that, it's there, social life, it's there because we did things that were just an average child doesn't get to do, right? We did prison programs, we were doing all kinds of programs, right? Then we were doing, so in this way, they were able to, how people say that the real education really happens outside the home. They say that real education doesn't happen behind a desk, but it happens outside the home. So in this way, Prabhupada gave us everything where children could benefit. So let's go to the next one. So then in our first slide for this first section, we're going to talk about what is it that we can do to help our children become Krishna conscious. So, so first we'll talk about what are the things we should avoid, the don'ts, and then we'll do the do's, okay, because it's more fun. Right? So Gopal will cover the first part, and that is avoiding television and limiting internet. Okay, and this is the the proper place to do that, right?
Yes. Okay, Hare Krishna. Very nice to be here again. So I actually came to Seattle only a few years ago. So I always enjoy coming here. It's such a nice, beautiful temple. And it's very nice now to do this seminar. I know my mother has been thinking since a long time to come to Seattle and do this seminar and meet all of you who she's corresponded with. So very grateful again to be here. This first section is on preparing the home. And the first thing that we need to do to prepare the home is to avoid television. So why avoid television? And of course this is a principle that devotees know about very well. It's a principle that we're already possibly acquainted with, but we sometimes don't take it so seriously. We think a little bit of television or a few hours of television is okay. So there's a few reasons why television is not recommended for children. And actually these are not just devotional principles. These are not just principles that devotees have taught or that Srila Prabhupada has taught, but these are actually principles that all educators around the globe agree with. And many families, even non-devotee families, follow this principle in their home. There's a very common bumper sticker or sticker you'll see sometimes. Very few homes, but you'll see that on like people's door or in their car, they'll have a TV and then they'll have this round thing and then a cross in it, right? That no television in this house. Why? Because there's a few points here. First of all, it breaks all the four regulated principles. Television breaks the principles of religion, of morality. So we all know we have the four principles of no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication. In television, all four of these things that we are told not to do are celebrated, right? They're celebrated. It's like every other commercial is of a steakhouse or a hamburger or a Wendy's, with the big beef or steak or chicken or fries. So every meat eating is being glorified. Then the movies, the commercials, illicit sex is being glorified. Intoxication, alcohol, these are sort of norms. And then finally gambling also. So television, on one hand, we encourage our children, we tell our children that don't do these four things. These things are not good for you. Every society tells young people not to do these four things. But on the other hand, then we're giving them something that is encouraging them in the opposite direction. At every other moment, it's telling us that these things are okay, these things are good, we should want these things. It's reminding us of these things. So there's two problems with television. And the first one is the content, which is what we're starting to discuss. The content of television is not good. And the second problem is that even if the content is somewhat good, the medium of getting that knowledge is not so good also. So the medium or the method by which it's being transmitted is also not good for children. But first, let's focus a little more on the content, right? That what is wrong with the content. So first of all, it breaks all the four regulated principles. Right? And then the second thing is that not only does it do this for us, many things do. Even if you drive down the road, right, you will see billboards and those break the regulated principles or things like that. But it does so on a very regular basis, and it does so at the most intimate hours of the day for us. Mother Urmila once wrote an article in Back to Godhead magazine, and the title of that article was The One-Eyed Guru. One-eyed Guru. So the television, she compared it to a one-eyed guru. Why is that? Well, because the television, when we have it at home, we keep it in the most central part of our home, or we keep it in the bedroom, right, in a very central place, and we keep it on an elevated spot. So it's not like on the ground; it's like up like this nice spot there, right? And the whole family gives its rapt attention to it. The guru maybe once in a year, or maybe once in a month, or at most once a week. If you live in Seattle, maybe your guru is Hari Vilas Prabhu, so then maybe once a week you go and you listen to your guru. But this television set, this guru you listen to every single day, right? Maybe twice a day, sometimes late in the evening. And so it's instructing us in a very exalted place. And now they get bigger and bigger also. So gurus, they're very big. Televisions also, they get in size, they increase. And so we've given it a very special place in our home and in our life, right? And in our heart. Right? And so therefore, even if we disagree with what the content is, so you say, of course I know that this is wrong. I'm just watching for fun. Even if we disagree, but ultimately, it starts to rub off on us. Right? It starts to rub on us. And the qualities of the people in the television set, we start to imbibe those qualities in our own life, in our day-to-day experience. Right? And this is the effect of association. Right? Television becomes our association. And the first thing in Krishna consciousness we are encouraged to do is to have good association, not negative association, not bad association. So the TV teaches us bad morals because the television serials are teaching us bad morals. The TV teaches us bad character, aside from even the four regulated principles. Right? It teaches us bad mannerisms. It gives us bad thoughts. I remember I didn't watch television growing up, but sometimes when going on airlines, then if the flight is very long, then that was a time when, I would watch something to maybe see what's on, right? So I remember once watching this television soap opera, and it came as a shock to me because I saw it, and in that 20 minutes, it was just like every horrible thought that you can have was present in that 20 minutes. And then secondly, I noticed that the whole point of that soap opera, that television serial, was just to show how stupid your parents are. Right? It's just like the whole theme of it was how stupid their mom is, how stupid their dad is. And like it was just like making a complete, a joke, a fun of the revered members of our family or our community. Right? So that's the consciousness, right? That's the mentality that the modern Western, education or television is about. The Vedic culture was the opposite, right? One of respect, one of, gaining wisdom from our elders. But this thing was just twisting it around, and it made it seem so okay. And I could see then, after that, after watching this and after watching it many times, why someone would feel like this. And today you see that children, they very openly, they tell their parents to shut up, or, they say these words like that. And that also comes as a shock. But it's very common in today's society. I teach at a university, so I see that every day. Their parents will come to drop them off or something, and they'll say something like, make a joke, and the student will respond to them, oh, shut up, Dad. Something like this. It's very, and where are they getting this from? This is from watching television. And it doesn't happen overnight. Gradually, it just feels okay because you see other people doing the same thing. So all the hard work that you put in to make your home the nice atmosphere, right? All the hard work that you put in to raise your child having good qualities and good culture, it all get ruined It gets ruined by this one thing called television. And imperceptibly so, right? Very gradually. So this is the problem about the content of television. Why television doesn't help us content-wise. Now, someone will say, well, there's also good programs on TV, right? There's Discovery Channel, discovery programs that show wildlife, and then there's also the news, right? You have to be connected in this world. If you're not connected, then you might look foolish if you don't know the news. So what about the good programs? What about the news and the discovery channels? One lady, she was telling us that practically speaking, my child learned reading through video games. He would read the video, and that's how he learned reading. Or my child learned geography, or about the rest of the world through television. So what about the good TV? So yes, that is true. There are some very good movies, serials, episodes that come on television. But like they say, that one glass of wine is good for health. One glass of wine is very good for health. But why we don't drink wine? Because who stops at one glass? Right? No one stops at one glass. So in the same way, television might be good, and that those particular channels, discovery channels, might be good for us. But as youngsters or even as parents, the problem is that once we turn that on, who turns it off? Right? We just keep watching it. And we keep watching it, and we watch it more, and we watch it more and more and more. So television, first of all, wastes time. So even if the content is good, but you'll watch 30 minutes of good content, and then hours and hours of wasting time. They did a survey, something like this, and they said that the average child watches anywhere from 4 to 6 hours of television every single day. And this is not just when it's just on in the house. This is actually when they're watching. So imagine, in that time period, in those 4 to 6 hours, how much more can a person do? Right? Children go to school 8 hours a day, and then it takes an hour to go there, hour to come back. So it's about 10 hours, the entire school experience. Then at night they sleep 8 hours a day, or maybe 8 to 10 hours. So that's about another. And then brushing teeth, that's another 10 hours there. So that's 20 hours. And the remaining 4 hours of the day are being spent in watching television. And even if it's good, what do we gain from that 4 hours of television? Right? It used to be in the past that people would, as families, when they were together, someone would bring out a violin, and they'd start playing the violin. Or they would play some musical instrument. Someone would recite some poetry. Or there would be some family time together. But now, all that family time is just television time, spent watching television, wasting our life away. Another statistic is that, I think in 40 years, they said an average person will spend 9 years of their life watching television. So by the time they're, I forget, what was it? By the time they're like 65 or something, 9 years of their life, they've just sat in front of the television. And then the final thing is that even if we do turn it off, the television serial that we see, let's say the Discovery Channel, studies have shown that the knowledge that we get from television is still not going to be retained by the student in such a proper way as knowledge that you gain by listening to the radio or reading a book. Why? Because they've done studies on this with children that when you're sitting in front of the television, all your senses are already given everything that you need. So your brain activity is literally zero. So basically everything is there, you're seeing it, right? Your vision is completely there, and you're hearing everything. And so if you're watching a Discovery Channel, your mind shuts off and your brain shuts off, and basically you're just watching this. You're just being spoon-fed this knowledge. Now they compare this with hearing the radio. Right? If you were to hear the same information, not on television but via the radio, then you cannot see the screen. Right? There's no visual. visual stimulation there. It's simply coming through your ears. So what happens then? They study the brain of the child and they say that, well, they hear it and they don't see it. Immediately their creativity starts to work. And they start to imagine. They start to imagine the scene that they are hearing. And what that does is that it gets their brain moving and it makes them more creative and it makes them more active. And finally, if you get the same information by reading a book, then you're not being passive, but rather you are being active. So not only are you not seeing, but you're also not hearing. You have to make the effort of reading, and then by reading, you both, you imagine the sounds and you also imagine the vision, the sights in your mind as you read. So the same knowledge will actually be retained longer, will actually create a sharper brain if it's received not through television, but by either hearing it on the radio, hearing something, or reading it in a book. And this is why in today's children you see that they have very short attention spans compared to children of before. Why? Because the brain has become lazy, and television makes the brain lazy. So they say that how it used to be that every 1 minute they had to change the scene. And now it's like every 15 seconds they have to change the scene. Because as time goes on, people have less and less attention span. So even in television, things are moving too fast. Like if you watch, old time movies, maybe some of you have, like the very ancient spiritual movies that they were made in India. Like if you show it to students, they'll almost fall asleep. Because they'll be very bored. It's like it moves very slowly, right? They'll show one scene and like someone's crying and they'll cry for 5 minutes and then they'll cry for 10 minutes, right? And then there'll be some conversation and the conversation will go on for 15, 20 minutes. And before, when people used to watch this, they'll be completely enwrapped. It's like, wow, what a nice conversation. Or, like now it's like after 30 seconds, it needs to change, right? The scene needs to change. Because they've also done studies that now it's like every 18 seconds, the scene has to change. Otherwise, people's attention doesn't stay. And this is all more the case. Of course, that's a whole new subject, but all more the case with cell phones and internet, especially cell phones, that we need this dopamine, they say, right? Every few seconds, we need this brain charge. Otherwise, people, they can't sit and concentrate on something for 30 minutes or an hour because they have to check their phone. And it's not because they have to check their phone, it's because they want to check their phone because they're used to being distracted. So all of these things, television, internet, cell phones, they are tools, right? They are there. They're not, intrinsically bad necessarily. But all of these things, they destroy our attention span. They destroy our peace. They destroy a peaceful child. And that the medium of that information is very is not good for the child's development. And so even if that information is very good, we should try to get that information for our children. We should have them get that information by reading a book or hearing something, not through television. We should make that effort of not just making the brain lazy, but trying to do that. I should just make a few quick final points here that yes, there is a place for good movies, right? Growing up, we would watch Mahabharata, we would watch Ramayana, or something Krishna conscious. So those are very nice. But in our mind growing up, it was always very clear that we always had a TV in the house, but we never turned it on. That we would never watch just the normal TV. The TV was there only to watch Krishna conscious movies. And even that, it wasn't too much. It's not like, our source of Krishna consciousness is the TV now, or is the movies, like this. If we needed to know the news, then there's a very simple way of knowing the news. Before there were newspapers, now of course it's the internet, but you just take a newspaper and you read all the headlines. If you read all the headlines, within 5 minutes, you can get all the news that the television gives you in the course of 1 hour. Right? In television, they repeat it, and then they repeat it, and they repeat it over again, and they repeat it over again. It's like the same news will come 15 times in one day, the same news, and you just, okay, this is the latest update. Like one time, I remember they were showing this, it was just about basically someone who stole a car, right? And it was like these cops were chasing the car, and for 2 hours they're covering this news. So you open the TV, like the first time, and the policeman is chasing this car. So he's chasing behind, they're showing him like this. Then 30 minutes later, open the television again. Now the policeman is only 5 feet away, he's a bit closer like this. And then 45 minutes again, same thing. Oh, he made a left turn, the police made a left turn. So all of that news, it took them 2 hours. The next day you read the news, it'll be on the headline, man runs off with car, police chase, police crashes into car, man in prison. Right? Job is done. So like this, we can also, the news we can get by reading the headlines. And in this way keep ourselves up to date, but avoid the distraction of television. So yes, so we should keep this in mind, that for the first thing to prepare the home is to give up those things which are not conducive for our spiritual life. And the first thing there is our television set. Right?
So, people talk a lot about, there's a lot of questions during seminars about restrictions. Why we should restrict our children from those things that normally another child out there would do. And, but, we have to understand that if we raise our children early on with these don'ts, then they become part of his life. It's not a restriction anymore. For a lot of us who have grown up with eating meat or something, we may have, then to give it up suddenly is very difficult, because you've already developed a taste, you've already grown up. But imagine a child who's never ever tasted or seen, eaten meat, right? For him, is that an austerity? Is that a restriction? No, right? So the point of the matter is that if we begin introducing these things, it's not something that it's not a restriction anymore. They actually develop a taste for it. Because when a person is in the mode of goodness, one becomes happy, right? So it becomes very enjoyable. And that's why Prabhupada writes how, children who are, given a few of these, it's not even austerity. I don't even see it as an austerity, right? It's something you just enjoy. So that's why he would quote, Gurukula children who would serve their guru, and they would sleep on the bare floor, and eat simple food. They've found it a great deal of fun. It's because they've been given at the right time. But when we allow our children with too much sense enjoyment, then to adopt a lifestyle which is which is curbing all that is very difficult, because they've already accepted that standard of enjoyment, So it's important that we allow them early on for these things, because there is no such thing as a neutral upbringing. You either give them Krishna consciousness or you give them materialism, right? Now, if you give them Krishna consciousness, there's a chance that when they grow up, they may give it up. They may get distracted and say, I don't want it. It's my choice. You can do it only for so long. One day they have to fly their nest, right? You can't, monitor them. They have to go and be who they want to be. But then you've given them a whole lifestyle of Krishna consciousness, so it's quite possible they're going to come back and say, after getting distracted for some years, they may come back and say, wow, this is what I want to be. Because you've already stacking the odds in favor of, spiritual life, right? But if you give them thinking that, this is being so restrictive because it's not fair to them, because, look at other children are doing it and they're missing out, then and you're hoping that later on they're going to take to Krishna consciousness, it's going to be very difficult, because already they've tasted a lot of materialism. So in that way, these restrictions that Gopal is talking about is very, very valuable. Because if you say no right now, I've heard stories like even children out there, karmis, they say that, if you talk to them, they will say that how they wish they were saved from these phones, these smartphones. Because there's so much suicide because of these smartphones. And they wish that they had, and they were really upset why their parents actually allowed them to take that. Because their whole childhood has been spoiled. How now they're exposed to all kinds of things, pornography, through internet. It's all there, And so these things become very valuable. Do you want to speak a little bit about that? Yeah.
I should say a few words about the internet. So, many times people think, oh, television is bad, but the internet is okay. Yes, right. The internet, at least the television, there's some restriction there, there's some limitation there. But the internet, it's like, let's say, if you took all the trash in the city and you put it in your house, that's what the internet is, right? It's like all the trash in the entire world, and it's there in one place. Of course, there's also good things on the internet. There's very good websites. There's very good resources there. We have to be know how to use it. But for the untrained user, which is the child who's just searching it like this, there's more bad things than there are good things, and they're definitely ultimately going to end up on the bad content if they're not restricted in some way, right? So then, on one hand, we need the internet in today's society. It's just not realistic. I have a smartphone. I have, email address, internet. On one hand, we need the internet, and on the other hand, it's something that's not good at all. So how do we do these two things? Like television, we can just turn it off. But the unfortunate thing is the internet, we can't turn it off. It's like you book your airlines through the internet, you even get a haircut through the internet. Everything's through the internet these days, right? So how do you do that? Well, it's just like the internet is a very powerful tool. Right? People say, the internet is a very powerful tool. So we agree, indeed it is a very powerful tool. And therefore it should be used like a tool. It is just a tool. It has to be used and restricted to the degree that we use a tool. Just like our carpenter knows that a hammer is a very powerful tool to make a nice desk or a building or whatnot. So the hammer is a very powerful tool. Now just because it's a powerful tool, it doesn't mean that, the hammer is a very powerful tool, so we always keep it in our backpack. And let me put it in my backpack. It's a very useful tool, so let me take it to school. I'm going to the bathroom, let me take it along with me. It's a very powerful tool. Or I'm going to, my friend's house, let me take a hammer with me. No, it's a very powerful tool. It has a place when you need it for the specific reason that you need it. So in the same way, internet should be used like that. Internet is useful for email. It's useful for booking your tickets. It's useful for getting directions to an unknown place. It's a specific tool, it has its use. But it's not there. It's not meant for surfing and just wasting our time. It's not there just for us to develop a relationship with it. Right? Therefore, social media. We should have real friends, real groups, real communities. The temple, the friends at the temple, those are our friends. And we can meet them, speak to them, talk to them. Children today, they're obsessed with social media. And because of that, because they're on social media so much, they actually don't know how to have relationships. They don't know how to carry on a normal conversation. You talk to them and they'll, look down and start looking at their phone. It's like, they the small talk, they don't know how to do that anymore. It's like, as soon as there's a spot, a blank in between, someone's talking and there'll be like a little uncomfortable moment, they'll look down at their phone and they'll start doing something with their phone. And of course, you can always observe this. You go to airports, everyone is on their phone. Now you go to restaurants, and I was really surprised. I was walking by a restaurant in the airport, and I noticed every single person in the restaurant was eating and on the side looking at their phone or an iPad. Like, not a single person was greeting a new person or talking to someone, and none of them noticed it that everyone else was doing it. But every single person was on their phone. So children actually lose the skill of interpersonal relationships because of social media. Social media is the most unsocial thing that you can do. Right? So I used to have a Facebook account, and I think I wasted the most amount of time in my life during that time period when I had the Facebook account, and then I deleted it. But it was just like there's just no end to it. It's like every few minutes someone's adding a friend, and I had more friends than the person next to me, and it's like a whole waste of time. So again, these are very useful tools. We're not against technology, but a tool should be used as a tool, and that's the only purpose of the internet and the telephones and the gadgets that we have.
So now we will go on to the other thing I was thinking about the internet is it lacks source. The authentic source. You know how internet is so ephemeral. It's like Maya, very sophisticated form of Maya. You have one website now, and then very soon it's gone. You don't know where it's gone. So in terms of source, there's very few that are legitimate sources. So the children, they end up, being on websites which are, they are not authentic. And Gopal, being a professor, he has a lot of experience about that, about how students, they'll write a whole paper which are just nuggets, cut and paste from Google and stuff like that, and they actually don't go and read a book, and
actually it's very standard policy now. Like faculty, they'll tell their students that you have to have 3 non-internet sources. So sources that you physically went to the library and you checked them out. Because when you have a book, you flip through it and you get so much knowledge. When you search on the internet, you just search for specific words. You don't get the broad understanding. And secondly, like my mother was saying, Prabhupada always said that you judge the knowledge that you get by the source, right? You know how good it is or how bad it is by the person who's giving it to you. In the internet, there's no source. So you don't know, is that good knowledge or is that bad knowledge? Is it, so even on a material level, it's information that does not lead to a transformation. It's just information.
Okay, so now we will move on to the 3 do's that we recommend for in a home, so that children, which creates more attraction for spiritual life, right? So, yeah, the first one is a morning program. Now that's a little bit scary for everybody, because what Prabhupada's standard is 4:30 in the morning, Mangala Arati, right? And being grihasthas, this is one of the most challenging things, isn't it? Especially what to speak of children going to school, right? You barely get them there in time, right? So how to deal with these challenges? So even I had the same challenge, even though I was doing homeschooling, but yet we were running a preaching center, there were festivals going on, many times there were festivals, there were visitors. My husband, he would come home, he went a little late, like 9 o'clock, and he came home late. So the kids would wait for him and want to play with him. So that was again a challenge for me to get them in bed at the right time. So what I did was I had a morning program. I had it flexible. In other words, whenever they woke up, I tried to put them to bed at a decent time. So it would be roughly around 6 o'clock, in the morning. And then we would do a full morning program and then start the day after the morning program. Because the idea was that to have that discipline, that when you wake up, that's the first thing is you remember Krishna. You chant his holy name and you remember Krishna, because it naturally, when you get up and you chant and dance, your heart is cleansed and you become very saintly. And it becomes like a insulation, like a shield. When you go out into the world, the child is more able to take on those challenges. And what to speak of the challenges today in schools, right? It's a huge amount of challenge. We have to remember that children are living like 2 lives. They come home and they have a whole devotee lifestyle, and they go to school and they're dealing with that. when you think about it, it's really not fair on them, isn't it? Because they have this conflict. I'm a devotee, but yet, I have all these friends that I really like in school, and they are, they are having a different lifestyle. So the point is, how do we manage all these things? So it's a huge challenge for our children, and the way we do that is by giving giving them Krishna consciousness the first thing in the morning, because it sets the mind straight. It curbs all types of agitation. It puts the people in the platform of goodness, and they're more able to take on the challenges that the world has. Just like a man, he goes to work, right, every day. For him, also the struggle, but he's older, so the same challenges, right? So how do we make a life Krishna consciousness in spite of the fact that we are going out there, working and going to school? That's the challenge, right? And the same situation as Arjuna, right? Arjuna was in the battlefield fighting. He was at war, and yet, he was Krishna conscious. So in other words, we have to give them Krishna consciousness. It's not a hopeless thing. It's just challenging, but it can be done. In other words, it can be done if we just give them that encouragement and that an atmosphere, an environment at home that encourages all that, and of course our own example, right? So that's what I did, and so my whole point was not to miss it. Like no matter when we do it. In other words, it sets a discipline so that later on when they go to college and they're on their own, they will still do a program. Now flexibility is another thing that we can manage. We can adjust, right? So in other words, the children are going to school, so how do we fit everything in? Right? So you can do 10 minutes in front of the altar instead of doing a whole full hour of a program that normally would be done in a temple, right? So you can do a shorter version. Somebody said, well, they don't even have that time to do it. Okay, you can do it in the car, sing all the prayers there, When there's a will, there's a way. In other words, we have to begin the day. I mean, if you can manage a little bit more fine. Otherwise, okay, do it in the car or in the evening when the child comes home. You can put a longer program, a longer time, a little longer time, like chanting together in front of the deities. Like there has to be some way to express our love for Krishna in a practical way. And that's we're going to cover very soon in a section for deity worship, how important it is for children to be in front of the deity. Deity worship doesn't mean just dressing Krishna or bathing him. It also means standing in front of Krishna and glorifying him, right? So that's one thing. And then I was thinking about talking a little bit about japa, because it's a very hot topic. So many parents ask me about japa. Children don't want to do japa, right? It's one of the challenges. They don't want to do japa. They can sit for kirtan, wonderful kirtan, in the temple, but then if you ask them to do japa. So it was a struggle for me also, because it's something. So what I did was I made it a point that whenever they chant around, I would be with them. I never left them alone, because the idea was that they develop good habits. Otherwise they think, okay, no, I'm just have to chant, so somehow I have to get through it, and they develop bad habits. In other words, right? They just think it's. So Prabhupada was very careful. He wanted to make sure that japa was not given to children in the form of punishment. Okay, you haven't been a good boy today, so you chant one round. Now that's a form of punishment, or it should not be given as a form of reward. Oh, you've been so good today, you've chanted 5 rounds, come on, I'll give you ice cream. So when we give that message to them as making japa as a punishment or reward, we are telling there's something better for you than japa. It's something a burden, right? So we have to give them the idea that japa is actually fun. So what we would do in the temple, we would get together, like every Ekadashi, the devotees would come together and we would chant japa together, And this way the children would also be there and they would be encouraged because everybody else is chanting, on that day. And they would also chant, collective chanting, right? Or we started one thing called Japathon, which is once a year, on New Year's Day, the 1st of January, we chant. We as many rounds as we can. We made it a goal that we'd chant as many as people in Idaho, that many rounds. And we always went over that, actually. And there were children who were chanting 40 rounds, 30 rounds, and feeling so excited and so so challenged.
One name for every resident of Idaho. So by the end of the Japathon, everyone collectively would chant like 1.5 million names. And there were at that time about 1.5 million people in Idaho. So we do one name for every resident of Idaho.
Yes. So this was so you can do that in your community, like do programs like that where it encourages children to chant japa. The idea behind japa and kirtan was very simple. Prabhupada understood. He said that how this yuga is is so difficult to do. It's so difficult to overcome the challenges. What the children face today is illicit sex, drugs, and all kinds of nonsense there, right? So how to overcome these things? And we have the story of Ajamal, even though he was raised as a wonderful Brahman, he still succumbed, to the attraction of the opposite sex. He still succumbed. So now Prabhupada is saying this, Ajamal saw that once in his lifetime. And how many times do the children see now? It's everywhere, right? So what can how can we expect them to be able to overcome these challenges, right? And because chanting of the holy name is the yuga dharma for this age, when we introduce chanting of the holy name, this is one weapon that can counteract all these temptations. And that's why Prabhupada stressed, among all the instructions he stressed, chanting 16 rounds was the most important, right? Because this is the only thing, and congregational chanting of the holy name is the only thing that can, even in the most sinful, it can give stirrings of bhakti, right? So what to speak of our children who are born in devotee families, what it can do to them, right? So this japa and chanting must be introduced at all levels.
One thing about the morning program, I remember, just to re-emphasize this point, my mother said that in family life, things are very unpredictable, like someone's sick or, late night program or, something like this. So our morning program was oftentimes not on a set time, or it was not very early. But it was always the first thing that we did in the day. So that is more practical, and that was sort of more realistic for us, that, even if we got up at 8 in the morning, and then, brush our teeth, everything. Then 9 in the morning, we would do our morning program. It was the first thing in our day, and it became it became a habit. It became part of us, who we are. There was a study done at, I think, Stanford or Harvard, and they said that if you do the same thing every day for 66 days, it becomes a habit. From a chore, so to say, it becomes a habit. So that became then a habit for us. That, well, when you wake up in the morning, you do your morning program. And then when I went to study, I was alone in Oxford like this, and even later on, somehow that stayed with me, where I would actually feel odd if I got up and I didn't do some sort of morning program as the first thing in the day. And then go on with my life. And to this day, if I miss it, I feel odd, because it becomes part of you. Like, this is the first thing I do. Just like if you were to get up and you don't brush your teeth, and you go to work or something, you'll feel funny the whole day that I didn't brush my teeth, because it becomes part of you. This is your habit. So just to re-emphasize that point with children, as they're growing, earlier on they need more sleep, so your morning program will be later. Then as they grow, it will become less. It'll become earlier. But whenever it is, it's the first day. And second thing, yes, with japa, that we would chant together as a family, or just me and my mother, or me and my mother and my brother. We would chant together, and that would make japa very enjoyable.
So the next thing is Prashadam. Now this is, again, can be very challenging, especially if children are going to school. But we have to think that how important, like we say, we are what we eat. Food immediately, there's one thing that hits the soul very strongly and directly, is the food that we put in our mouth. Because we are taking the consciousness of the person who's cooked that food. If it's a non-devotee food, then we are taking that consciousness. Just like an artist, when you see a drawing of an artist, then whatever you see, it affects you. If you see all kinds of modern art and gross things, then immediately you're affected by it, right? So the same way, the food acts in the same way. And we spend so much of our life, right, cooking, especially women, if they're at home. 75% or 50% of our time goes in just trying to manage the house, cooking and cleaning, so much. So why not? So if we just purify this one thing, I think Gopal was telling me how Prabhupada said that how, if devotees would just only take a vow of just eating prasadam, they'd go back to Godhead. Just that one thing. You can imagine how powerful it is. So in the early days, it was tough because the children want so much variety. It's so available out there. You go to a grocery store, everything is so easy just to pick something and just give it, and that's it, And we don't have to, and especially not having help. Like in India, there's so much help, right? You can hire people and to come and help and clean your home and everything. And so it's very challenging. So it was very, it's difficult. But we have to take comfort in the fact that it's only in the early days. When children when they're young, they need a lot of variety because they experience life through the tongue, right? They want so much. There's so much temptation, and they want this, that, all kinds of things. So it's very difficult. So one has to cook a lot. But as they get older, then other interests take over, and you can make it simpler. So these are some of the things I did. And the other challenge I faced was, when there was birthday parties, right? Pizza parties and birthday parties in homes that, they don't have prasadam, right? How to manage that. Because you see the children's faces, they want to be there. So I would, again, we're going to hear that in the second section, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shastra education, where the philosophy has to be there. Children need constant reminders. When they're reading Prabhupada's books, when they're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, they get these constant, confirmations. Why we are devotees, why we don't do things that others do. That confirmation has to be there. That feeding of the intelligence has to be there simultaneously, not just that. That's why you see today so many people who've grown up with parents who never did all this. They were always in the mode of goodness, but yet now they don't follow it. They've given it up. Because just giving the traditions itself doesn't work, right? It has to be backed of why we are like that. The philosophy has to come with it. So that really, we were doing Srimad Bhagavatam, so we were discussing these things because they come up. In Bhagavatam, they all come up. In Prabhupada's books, they all come up. So it gives you a chance to discuss those things. So it gives them the constant reminders why we are devotees, why we don't do these things, and why it's so wonderful to be different, right? Why this food is not good for us. So that, and then we would, and of course when they were little, of course you have to give them the way they can digest. A little child can digest in a certain way. But you'll be surprised how a little child is stronger than you. When they know they have the support of the parents, they will go out to birthday parties and they will say, oh, this cake has eggs, I'm not going to eat it. Because they take it very seriously. It's we who become very weak, generally. Isn't it true? So we have to be careful about that. I remember one mother in Boise, she came to me and I said, why are you giving, I asked her, why are you eating meat and giving your children? She says, I just feel so sorry for them because everybody else is eating. So this kind of compassion, how useless it is, right? So we have to be thinking that, yes, when we give those things to them, the children actually, if you give it in a way that they can understand, backed by good philosophy, they actually are willing to accept these things, right? So then sometimes I would take the food with me. I would take my own pizza and just put it there. The challenge is, in fact, when they went to homes, American, Western homes, it was a lot easier to actually do this, because people actually respected you for being different. If you just told them that, we just don't eat in a kitchen, food from a kitchen that cooks meat. Otherwise, they put all kinds of vegetarian stuff in front of you, right? Yes, it's vegetarian. I promise you, I didn't put any meat in there. So how do you handle that? Okay, so you say, well, we have a restriction where we don't eat food that's cooked in a kitchen that cooks meat, and they respect you. The point is that you have to consistently follow that. It's not like one day you follow that and the next day you forget, you become weak and say, it's okay, I'm going to eat it today, but then we don't eat the next day, you know. So you have to follow a consistent pattern, and then they respect you. And this holds true for any people who go to work, right? If you follow a consistent point, they will respect you for that, because they respect, the culture here is that they respect you, you know, for being different, you know. Even though America is called the melting pot, everybody, you know, adopts these values, you know, and gives up their own values. But yet, they respect you for that. So the same thing we can inculcate in the children, you know, that we consistently follow that, and why we follow that, and then we try to do, you know, according to that. You know, if it needs, okay, we take our own food. And then you give others also prasadam, right? So many times I remember my husband would have programs, like parties for his work. And I would take a whole big pot of pakoras or something. And then we would fill up on pakoras, you know, and then everybody else also get. It's fine, you know.
Yes. Yeah, actually, we shouldn't discuss this slide too much, otherwise people may get too hungry. But at work, a nice way, like my mother was saying, is if from the very beginning you tell your co-workers that, you know, I don't eat out, and I have certain, you know, that I don't eat cooked food outside, and I have certain restrictions, then they'll respect you for it. The problem is if halfway through you try to change, then they'll think, you know, what happened? And then they will, but if you're true to your principles, they'll feel, okay, this person has certain principles and they respect you for that. And any place that we go, some events you have to go for, like, you know, you have to eat out at work, go for lunch events. So when we do go out, we will order a salad. And these days, especially in America, salad is like a very healthy diet. It's like, you know, it's keto, it's everything, like it's the best diet. So, you know, we'll order a salad or some fruits, and those options are generally always available. And oftentimes what happens is that when you order these things, then like one time I was at some event and everyone had their meals, and we were at this restaurant, I just ordered a salad and some fruits, and when the salad came, they really like put a lot of effort into it, and they, you know, made the salad really nice. And when that comes, then my co-workers were looking over and they're like, oh, what did you get? This looks really nice. This seems better than what we got. So it's actually very easy to still have your social life and still go out for lunches and be part of, you know, these events if you're just very clear from the beginning what you want. And they're very happy to make a nice salad for you, either if it's a restaurant or if it's someone's home, and you say, you know, this is what I eat for lunch. And it worked out very well. I remember one time my father was traveling, and he was, I think, in Japan, and my mother had packed him all this food, but his business trip was longer than the food could last. So the last 1 week he was out of food, and for the rest of that 1 week he was just eating dates and nuts and dried fruits. And you know, when we came to know that, when we heard about that, that made a big impression on us, because we were thinking that, well, you know, he's traveling and there's no food, yet he still did not eat out, because in Japan it's hard to get even vegetarian food, right? So, but he just, you know, survived on that, and so those things are very good because they teach us austerity and they make us more healthy. You know, it's actually, I think about myself that if I could eat everywhere, wherever I wanted, it'd actually be so miserable because there's too many options. It's like, how could you not go to Pizza Hut every day and eat a pizza, or, you know, or like this? Actually, our restrictions allow us to have a healthier diet and a more, you know, good diet. So.
So another nice, important thing that is good association. Prabhupada gave some very nice pointers towards that. He gave the example of Tarzan, you know, how he grew up with monkeys and he developed the habits of monkeys. So he said children are like that, you know. Whoever association you put, they become like that. It's very simple. Because, you know, and he compared them to like soft dough. You know, when you have soft dough, then you make pastries and you make different types of pastries. The children are like that. They're like soft dough, and you can mold them, because nobody grows up, with bad habits, right? Nobody grows up liking smoking and drinking. It's developed by association. So if we put our children in the right association, they develop good habits. So if it's good for us, it's good for them also. So again, some very challenges here, especially for children who are going to school. How do we counteract the association outside? By giving them what we can in terms of devotee association. Because giving them the association of sannyasis and senior devotees, very, very important, because in this way they develop good habits. Yeah, because they provide good role models. What we have to understand, that children need good role models. So important. Because we know how it can affect. You see out there how children grow up with models that are not very good, and what effect it has on them. And many times you read the news and you see that how somebody who's been ideal in their, in their habits of being good family people, having the right, doing the right things, very soon they fell down, right? Because nothing stays in the platform of goodness. Material goodness is never pure. It always becomes contaminated with passion and ignorance over time. But Krishna conscious good role models are the role models that children can depend on, and they can live their life imitating those role models. But models out there, if they were to follow, and there's so much now competition, right? There's so many authorities now for children. Sometimes I was saying earlier to some parents, how it's so difficult. Even sometimes I feel like even giving them a good example also doesn't work for children, because you have so many authorities out there. They don't even, it doesn't even affect them to have a good example at home, right? There's so much pressure. There's so much peer pressure out there. So many heroes out there. So many authorities out there. Right? But the point is that when we give them Krishna conscious association, there's something it does to them. It really purifies their heart. So even a minute of that association becomes very beneficial. And in Boise, we had some good association of sannyasis who came through Boise. In particular, there were 3 sannyasis, and they had a very deep effect on the children, because they were with them and they gave their association to them. So it's very, very nice to give them these role models. So if you get a chance, you can, they traveled one time to with Ganapati Swami. He was coming through to Boise many times of the year, like 3 times out of the year. He would do book tables there, and he did university programs. And one time he took them to Calcutta and to Vrindavan and Mayapur for a whole month. And they got a chance to be with him. And he was just amazing. And the children were traveling with him on trains, and he would wake them up for Mangalarti and tell them, okay, now you can go back to sleep. And they would go back to sleep. Gave them that practical, knowledge that you couldn't get anywhere, right? That kind of association is so important for them. So we have to take opportunities like that for them. Take them on Raj Mandal, Parikram in Vrindavan, where they get some good association. Because here you're fighting with a lot of bad association. So how to give them that bombardment of the other side? One time Gopal, he took 1 year off after, after
my bachelor's.
After his bachelor's, just to travel with his spiritual master. And everybody was so shocked. How can you allow a year off like that? And I was thinking, well, 1 year out of your life, but it has such a deep, and it was just at the right time, when a child is just going through so much confusion and making sense of the world and everything. If you give them at the right time this kind of association, it's so valuable, and this way, their hearts, so you can try like that, things like that. If not, something like going off, taking a semester off, or some part of your, school year, and going and doing something in Mayapur, doing Bhakti Shastri or something,
There's one devotee family, and very nice, very elevated family in our movement, and they were struggling with their son. Their son was just not wanting to be a devotee, was sort of losing his interest in Krishna consciousness. So they sent him for a Bhakti Shastri in Mayapur. And when he came back, he was just a different person, completely transformed. So these spiritual retreats, these spiritual opportunities are very effective, and they're also very nice. You know, I did my Bhakti Shastri in Philadelphia when they used to offer it there. It was over one summer, and I remember it was one of the nicest experiences in my life. The 4 months there, they're all, you know, they were generally older than me, but there are other students there, and the friendships I made with them, the close connections, and the full absorption, it was just an unforgettable experience. In similar ways, my mother was describing the Vraja Mandal Parikrama. We did that 3 times growing up, and I still miss it. Now I teach at a university, so I can never get off at that time. It's in the middle of the semester, Karthik, so I'm waiting for my sabbatical. So that will be my next opportunity in life to do it. Those 1 month parikramas were also life-changing. I remember in the first one I was sick half the time, so I had to skip it. But like the second time and the third time, it was just no experience in the world like this. Living in Vrindavan for 1 month, walking every day, and then at night we would sleep in the tents, right? And take water out of the well and bathe in the Yamuna. Of course, now the Yamuna is not so it's very polluted. It's hard to bathe in it. But that association and also that experience went a very long ways. On this point of good association, this was, and of course this is not a homeschooling seminar, this is just parenting, but this is a point on homeschooling or Krishna conscious education, schools and homeschooling that's so important. I remember at the end of one seminar that my mother gave, a young lady, a young teenage girl, she came to my mother, a devotee girl, and she was saying, you know, this made so much sense. This was so nice because I always felt that it was so unfair for me growing up, because whatever my parents were telling me at home, that do this, do this, do this, they were sending me to a place that was teaching me the opposite thing. And I would be at school 8 to 10 hours a day, and there, you know, my friends, the faculty, the high school is all going in the other direction, and I was always feeling like I'm swimming upstream. So that association at school is so strong because it's 8 to 10 hours a day. The children are spending more time at school than they are spending at home. So ultimately that wins. No matter how good the parents are, ultimately the students are going to listen to their friends and their teachers there, and mainly their friends there. That peer pressure, that environment is going to win. And she was saying how it felt very conflicting. But with a Krishna conscious environment for school, we're actually giving them an environment that's consistent with what we're teaching them. Right? If they're being homeschooled, they're being taught the same thing, and the environment is also supporting that. It's not, you know, what can the student do if they try to be a devotee at school? You know, their friends think they're backward or they're foolish or they'll make fun of them. I remember when I went to university alone for the first time for my graduate work, then we had different colleges. So as part of this college, it was called the Queen's College, and the Queen never came. But it was still called the Queen's College there. And so at our first event there, the very first event, it was our convocation, we were all there. The provost of the college got on the speaker, you know, on the podium, and he said, the first thing that he said there was, he said, drinking is part of our culture, and now that you've joined this college, drinking will become part of your culture. Right? So it's like the first thing, it's like here's the indoctrination into our college. And then there are a few required dinners, and I remember that at one of them, I had to go, it was a required dinner, so same thing, I went there and, you know, asked for the salad, and I had a nice salad there. And then at the end, they were passing around drinks, and I was the only student who didn't drink. And so I was sitting on the table with all these other students, and I wasn't the one who was drinking all these things. And they started noticing that I'm the only person who doesn't drink. And so all the students, the whole crowd of them, they all just got on my case. They're just like, just try one sip, just try one sip. It won't kill you. I mean, like, why don't you, if it's so bad, why don't you try it? You know, just try one sip. And I distinctly remember that time that I was literally about to try one sip because the pressure was so strong. I just didn't know what else to do. And at that age, it is like, it is your reality. And then somehow by Krishna's grace, like one student in the whole group, he said, oh, give him a break. Don't, he was half drunk himself. So don't put so much pressure on him. And because he said that one thing, I found a way out. And then I didn't do it. But also at that moment, I remember what was going through my mind was that, what will my spiritual master think if I drink? What will my spiritual master think if I drink this? So, and that's what saved me. That's what sort of protected me. So the point is that peer pressure, and this was at university level, where a person is much older and much more mature. The other students are also much more mature. But that peer pressure is very strong. We should not underestimate it. It's very strong. And that's why devotee friends, devotee association, and devotee retreats are so important. Because we have to have an alternative. When I was studying at Oxford, then my alternative was the Bhaktivedanta manor. Because I had the Bhaktivedanta manor, that's why I think today I'm still a devotee. Because I had that alternative, that temple there. I had my party when the other students were going for their party. And because I knew I had my party, I could tolerate the fact that I was not part of their parties, that I was not part of their fun. And the other thing that's very important is we can go and study at any university we want in the world, but we should live with devotees when we're studying somewhere else, right? When we send our students out, we should not just see, how Ivy League is this. Indian parents are very concerned that their students should go to top universities. But part of our decision should be, is there a place where they can stay with devotees? So when I was at Oxford, I was staying in a family house with devotees. We had an Oxford Center for Vaishnav studies there. And there were always some students studying at Oxford. So together we had rented a house and we were living there with devotees. And because I had a place to come home every night that was with devotees, it was like a spiritual oasis. Then that's how I, went through my college years. And I went very well, no problem through the college years because I had that place to come to. If I stayed at in the dorms, I don't think I would have maintained. I don't think I would have been able to survive. It was because I was living with devotees, then I had that atmosphere. I was away from home, that was good for me. I learned how to fend for myself and all those things. But still, there's always, Prabhupada says we always do regulated enjoyment, right? So our children have to experience the world, but there also has to be some protection. Because if we just let them out for experience, then it may be too late. It may be too much. So I experienced the world, but I also had some nice association always. So that's the main criteria, that wherever we go, we should be sure, can I live with devotees there? Either we're living with family or we are living with devotees. But that's our intimate association, right? We have to associate with everyone, but Prabhupada said real association is a person you share food with. That's your real association. That's when the heart connects. The person you share, a house with, you share food with, those are your closest friends.
Yeah, and these decisions are the parents. Now he's speaking, about that time in his life, but it was our decision where we're going to send him, right? So, and that was tough because they did receive a scholarship from Harvard and things like that, because then so there are options, right? But then my spiritual master said that, that's the first criteria you see. For where is the association? That's more important. And that's when we decided to send them all that way. It was further away, but then yet there's association, you see. And at that time in Harvard, there was no association, So we have to balance and see what's good for our children, where they can survive, in spite of the fact that you may have done everything, possible. What to speak of if they've not even grown up much with Krishna consciousness? It's even more difficult. So these are some of the challenges we can face mostly. So we'll do this last one, and then we'll open up for questions. if anybody will have questions on this topic. So deity worship, this is very, very important for our children because it gives us a facility for them that a lot of us may not have had growing up, because, when, I know I grew up in India, and I was the youngest, and it wasn't, I was always allowed, to not to do anything with the deities, right? I studied my parents put me in a convent, and so everybody else did what they had to do, but I was never connected with going actually and doing deity worship, because a lot of us in India, they grew up with Vedic culture. Like my parents never ate meat, and they were all completely vegetarian. But who can say that we grew up in an environment where we're chanting the holy name every day of our life, or with such Krishna conscious education? None of us can say that. So these children are very special, because they grow up from day one with Krishna conscious association, right? So we're giving them a facility where they can actually develop a love for Krishna in a very personal way. They start seeing Krishna as a person, just like a child would see a doll. You give a doll, and he actually thinks it's a person. He puts the doll to rest, gives feeds it, and thinks it's a person, right? The same way, when you give deities to Krishna, to children, they actually think it's Krishna, They don't think that Krishna has appeared in the form of deity. They actually think it's Krishna, right? So they personalize God, and they develop a personal relationship. And this personal relationship manifests in many, many different ways in their life. Like we grow up, a lot of the people, especially growing up in the West, they actually don't, I remember preaching to young people in Boise, and the hardest thing they had was when they went in front of the altar. How do you relate with these things? They think them as idols. Like, it takes them a long time to actually develop a relationship with the Lord in the form of deities. Because we've grown up so impersonalistic. In this culture, it's so impersonal, right? Everything is so impersonal. And so therefore, to create that personalism back into our children, we have to, encourage them to worship deities. Because when they worship deities, they start thinking, oh, is Krishna okay today? Is he sad today? Is he happy today? Is he very hot today? Maybe I should turn on a fan today for him. Did Krishna eat today? So they're thinking of Krishna as a person. Whereas this, if you give them later on in their life, they actually have to learn very hard to develop that personal relationship, like a lot of us might have had that struggle. So there's a very nice quote by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma that I wanted to read to you. It's very, very good. He says, religions that have no provision for deity worship face the danger that those children born into the religion and those just beginning spiritual life, both of whom may have little or no understanding or of deep faith in Godhead, may become overtly materialistic and even develop aversion towards the Supreme Lord as a result of the absence of a deity form on which to fix their minds. Therefore, deity worship is the foundation of religion for general humanity. So, very, very powerful quote. So in other words, when children are very young, we can give them Krishna dolls to play with, right? And as they get older, they can assist us in deity worship. So what we did in our life, in our house, when children were 3 and 5 years old, we give them Gaur Nitai deities, and they were like 4 inches tall. And we would spend some time, they would spend some time with my assistants in bathing them, dressing them. And it took them a couple of hours, And when they're little, there's not, you can't teach them much. There's no academics or anything, So you can spend a lot of time with them doing that, right? Because there's more time. Because other things are not so important as yet. So they would dress them, bathe them, and then we put them back on the altar. We offer food, we do artik, all this. And they would be completely absorbed in that. And then they would dress up as pujaris and do artik. So a few hours of the day went like that. So in this way, Prabhupada said that how we could channel their play into these kind of activities. He would compare children to a materialist, how they always waste time. See, even children's time is very valuable. They have to play, but how do you channel their play into these kind of constructive activities? They were so absorbed during that time, completely absorbed. And the whole day would become so blissful because everything would be, Krishna would be the center. You know, all day they were aware that Krishna is here in the house and he's our chief person, our chief guest in the house, right? So it creates that mood the whole day for the whole family in that way. So, so therefore, so when they get older, then they were doing that, and then the rest of the day we do other activities, reading Krishna book or doing other things. I think this is good. Yeah, and we have so many examples in Shastra, all these great acharyas, they grew up doing that, right? Uddhava, Parikshit Maharaj, Mirabai, they all grew up playing with Krishna dolls and imitating the activities of in the real temple to their own deities, And Prabhupada writes about himself that how when he was very young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, his father gave him a couple forms of Radha and Krishna, and how he would dress them and bathe them, and he would copy the activities of the bigger temple, Radha Govinda temple. He'd wash them and then come home and do the same thing. So, and he said how lucky and then he quoted his Guru Maharaj and Uddhava and Mirabai, that how these people were so lucky because they got it from day one. They were able to do these things. So it's a great blessing to be born in a devotee family. So let's not waste our children's life. And if your children are still young, just give them that. Because it's a great fortune to be. There are 2 blessings, Prabhupada said. One is the blessing of a spiritual master, and the second is to be born in a devotee family. So these children are not ordinary, and we should consider them very, very special because they are here just to finish off their life in this life. Obviously, they're bringing already from their last life, but they're here just so we can help them to, finish off, their karma and go back to Godhead. There's a very nice quote by Srila Prabhupada. I'll end with that, and then I'll open up questions. Prabhupada said, the children should always be instructed by taking advantage of their playful mood and teaching them to play Krishna games, like pretending to be cowherd boys, cows, peacocks, or demons. And in this way, if they always think of Krishna by playing just like they're actually present in association with Krishna, then they will become Krishna conscious very quickly. In addition, there should be a little ABC, then prasad, then worshipping the deity, then more playing Krishna conscious game, some kirtan, a little more ABC, like that. In this way, always keep their minds and bodies engaged in different activities, because children are restless by nature, so they will want to change often. So Prabhupada always had this, he made everything so simple, didn't he? It was so simple. And we experienced to some extent that, how Krishna consciousness is so simple, and how while you're doing Krishna consciousness, the education is going on. Because everything is there. And we'll talk about that in the next section, when we do the Srimad Bhagavatam, how everything, anything that you want to teach the children is all contained within Krishna consciousness, So now we can open it for questions from parents. Anything? Yes. Okay.
We talk about peer pressure, right? So the peer pressure external world, but there's a peer pressure in the devotees. So wherein actually the blessing part of a big congregation, but also sometimes it becomes difficult for kids to wear their standards as well set.
Right.
So based on your experience, as you meet different families and different congregations, sometimes I feel as a parent, I'm struggling, okay, I'm saying this is the model that we should follow, but then they say, no, they're all devotees. So how do you as a parent, how do I do?
Yes. Yeah, that's a nice question.
Go ahead.
वो उन्हीं का ही question है.
Huh?
उन्हीं का ही question है. उन्हीं का ही question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I was actually thinking of this also. Prabhupada in one place says that our association, or you could say our, the question is that he has, the question that he has is that I was speaking about peer pressure, that how children have peer pressure from other students, and so if they're going to Karmi schools, that peer pressure can become very strong, like I experienced personally. And so his question was, well, another challenge is peer pressure amongst devotee children, because there's many blessings of having a large congregation, but then there's also some drawbacks, that there's so many different types of devotee children also with different standards, and one's own standard might be higher than the other devotee children, and then there's some pressure, like parents tell them don't watch TV, but they say, but my other devotee friend is watching TV, and they're doing this and they're doing that, why should I be that? So on one hand, I was thinking about this, that one hand, to some degree, I mean, that's still a blessing, because Prabhupada said, our level should be in the mode of goodness, so that even if we fall, we will still fall in the mode of goodness. Right? So like I was giving you the example that how at Oxford I was living with devotees. I was living with devotees, and naturally all the devotees that I was living with were not of the same quality, including myself. It's like, we were all of kind of different natures. But still, that protection is there, because let's say if a boy and girl get attracted to each other, at least they'll get attracted to another devotee who has the same principles, who has the same philosophy. It won't be some girl or boy who's eats meat or drinks or all these things. So there's that level of protection in that devotee community, that at least the basic principles are the same. So it's still a big blessing. On the other hand, sometimes that association can be almost worse than materialistic association, because the devotee children, at least with karmi children, you can separate yourself and say, oh, this is different, this is bad. But with devotee children, they're devotees and they're doing it, so you are more even inclined to be on the wrong path. So that discrimination, if we're amongst devotees, then at least we'll be in the good mindset, and then that discrimination comes through knowledge. That's where the education part is important. That's where the reading Srimad Bhagavatam part, which we haven't covered until now, that's where that's important. Because then we can understand, okay, they're devotee, but there's different levels of devotee, and this devotee is not acting on the level of a devotee, so I have to still respect them, but they're still different. So, like my mother was saying, we oftentimes have a lot of emphasis in kirtan in our movement, which is very good, but along with the kirtan there also has to be the shastra, the knowledge, and the morning program and things like that will make us internally strong, so that we can discriminate and we can say, okay, no, this is not good. But like growing up, we had no devotee association there, so our main friends were this Sri Vaishnava family, and we used to go to their house and play, because amongst the families that we have, at least they were vegetarian and they were nice and they had good culture, and that was the best that we could find. So we have to find the middle ground there. You have something more to add to this?
So as a parent, right, we do our level.
As a parents, we try level best to give culture through various means. Some can do homeschooling. So for me, I can talk to my family. We tried all things. But at some point it comes, I guess, is when you don't see the results the way you expect. So do I, or me or my wife, should we say, is it the our failure versus is it their karma?
It's a challenging.
Right.
So how do we understand? There are a lot of successes. Sometimes also you are putting to challenges and say then you are. The question comes, right? Am I making my kids devotees, or am I not making them successful either ways? But so you just always struggle with that question. So I'm sure you might have met a lot of parents.
Ma, maybe you can answer. The question is how do you deal with the disappointment of my failure?
So, if you've given them, if you've given them Krishna consciousness to your best ability, then, you just have to wish for the best, later on. But rest assured that Krishna has already put a hook in them. And you don't know when he's going to pull one of those and it's going to just work. So again, that point that we were trying to make, that we should try to give them good association, put them in peers where there's some, encouragement for them, inspiration for them, and then leave it up to Krishna, because you've done your best and now it's up to Krishna, but yet we have to have the faith that Krishna is very kind. And he, at some point in his life, he's gonna come back, you see. But like I said earlier, not to give them would be a greater disaster, where we think, this is, they should have freedom of choice, or this is too restrictive for them, and things like that. I think then we have more to lose. Yeah.
Krishna. So Prabhu, a question for you. So you have grown up in a Krishna conscious environment from the beginning. So now you being a parent, you have a 2-year-old. So how do you engage her? Because even a 2-year-old kids, parent has to be constantly engage them these days, or they just give the phone. I mean, even when there are so many times parents have like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, they are doing something, the child is bothering them, they just give the phone, okay, watch this for 20 minutes. Even when they're doing garland, they don't know how to engage the child, they give the phone. So we just want to hear from you, how do you deal with that with your daughter?
Yes. No, that is such a, especially at times of, you could say, desperation, such a natural alternative, just to give the child the phone and then at least they are quiet. And of course, the better person to answer this would be my wife, Devi Murthy, who is not here today. She is primarily in charge of raising Sita, and she deals with that. So at a certain point, we had this sort of standard that we would never give her the phone except for the time when she would eat. Then we would play like a Krishna serial, and then Sita would eat at that time because her mind is fixed on the cartoon, on the Krishna cartoon. Then we would feed her. But very soon, actually, Devi Murthy noticed that actually even that was not necessary. Like, she found a way to feed Sita at that age. When they're 2 years old, they have a very, they won't eat anything. They have a difficult time. So she found a way to feed Sita without using the phone. And the way was that she would tell her stories continuously. While telling her stories, she would feed her, and that worked just as well as giving her the phone. So what we learned through the process, and my mother can add more to this, is that being creative, finding creative ways. The easy route is just to hand the child the phone. But to find creative ways to replace the phone and effectively do the same thing that the phone is doing, but do it without the phone. So the phone was giving her a Krishna story that she was absorbed with. It was diverting her, and therefore she could easily feed her that time. So then she realized, rather than using the phone, to tell her verbally. And as a result, what we noticed is that actually Sita has become more peaceful after that. On the days where she would see too much Krishna cartoons, even though they're Krishna cartoons, but she would use the phone too much, like she would be more agitated. Sita would be my daughter's name is Sita, she would be agitated for the rest of the day, and she would keep on going back and wanting the phone again, and wanting the phone again and again and again. Otherwise, she would forget about the phone, and she was just peaceful, more peaceful throughout the day. And actually, when we were in Boise, then Badrinath Swami, he was visiting one time, and he made a note of this. He was saying, "Oh, she's so peaceful at this age. You know, these children, this age, children are just screaming most of the time." And part of it was that, you know, these tools that we get in this, that we'll be covering and that we covered, that my mother describes, these things tend to just, make actually children more normal. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I remember one mother was saying that how she would put the video while they would eat. They were also young boys, and she said that they would eat too much because they thought now the video is going to shut off. So like they would eat so much, and then you could see that they were full and they'd keep on eating just to keep it longer, And so gradually she was determined, and then she fizzled it out, phased it out. So in other words, okay, some hard times are there, but then be determined to get rid of it. It's not an ongoing thing because it's so addictive. There's something, I don't know if you've seen them, little children getting agitated when they see a phone. The type of agitation that I've never seen earlier in my life. The type of that, and it's actually horrible because you become so agitated for something like that, which is so, not Krishna, but that. Like when I was, my children growing up, we didn't have these type of phones and things, and there was no question. We didn't even own a cell phone during that time, because my husband was very particular. We didn't have cell phones. He finally took a cell phone a few years ago, So, but of course, I took it much earlier because I had so many, things to do. But the point was that we had to do that. We have to, they become, otherwise you lose that opportunity for them to become attached to Krishna. As soon as they attach to something in such a way, they lose their attraction for Krishna. It's one or the other. So we should at least have some determination. Okay, it's happening, but we've got to get rid of it. The sooner the better. And like my daughter-in-law is doing, you actually tell them stories. And it just takes so much effort, right? It's a sacrifice. Raising children is a real sacrifice. It's pure devotional activity. It's actually no different. If you do it right, it's pure devotional activity. Because there's so much work in it. And a mother knows that, right? That is a time where you can relax. Okay, the little thing is going on, she's eating, okay, yeah, that's going on, But imagine telling a story during that time. It's like a lot of work, right? This is a huge sacrifice. And then she sits in the evening and she does Srimad Bhagavatam with her. And again, it's an effort. And then she gets, and that 1 hour of Bhagavatam in the evening when she does, the child, you can see her whole consciousness becomes different. They become saintly. They actually sit through classes many times. And everybody notices, oh, they are so different. And this happens with every child who's exposed to these things, to this kind of environment, No smartphones, no, all this, and creating this Krishna conscious atmosphere at home, reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, she's so little. You look at pictures. She's got a board where she draws things, explains the chapter, and she loves it. And she won't go to bed without an hour of Bhagavatam. It can be done even with a 2-year-old. In London, there's a baby Bhagavatam group they made. It's called Baby Bhagavatam. And in the next section, I'll be showing you a little video and a sound audio of that, where they do a chapter of Bhagavatam every week. And these are little children, like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and they do it in very creative ways. And they love it.
Sita actually every night now she'll ask for it. She expects the Bhagavatam time. So she obviously couldn't say Bhagavatam, so her name for Bhagavatam is Srinamiditam. And so every night is like when she starts getting sleepy, she'll demand it from her mother, just like she used to demand the phone. But now the Bhagavatam is part of her routine. And we still use the phone in emergencies. So like one time when she was out and I was at home, and then I had a phone call that I had to answer, so I put it up because it was just an emergency situation. Or if she's on the flight and in the plane there's something, then it's like, but it's not part of a daily thing. It's not part of it's not it's just used for an emergency, essentially.
We shouldn't use it as a babysitter. That's the point, But we should give it, so the child actually understands, is very intelligent, knows that this is a special, this is a time when I'm allowed. It's not like, okay, something's happening. They understand, okay, there's an emergency and this is what I get. But they don't expect it every day. Anyway, any more questions, anybody?
Back there.
Hare Krishna Mati. There's more of a concern rather than a question. So, in our congregation, obviously, it's quite a bit of different variety of kids come to the temple. And one of the patterns I'm seeing is that teenagers, like kids from 12 or 13 years old, they've been given a iPhone or a smartphone, and then my kid comes to my home and says, hey, how come she's having a smartphone? Why can't I have a phone? Right, and this puts us in a difficult situation, and I have to have the conversation saying, well, I don't know about the other devotee, why they gave the phone, but I personally feel it's not good for you. And you don't need a phone. Why don't you help me understand, or you convince me why you need a phone, then I can get you a phone. It's not about whether I have ability to buy a phone or not. And as a parent, I'm super concerned about your wellness, so I don't want to give a phone. And so this conversation we have quite a bit. And what I personally feel is, as a devotee families, at least we should have a principle not to give a smartphone to the kids, at least till they are 17, 18 years old. And if they really need a phone, you can just get a phone with not a smartphone, like a regular phone, if you want to stay in touch with them. Because, if they're going for a class or if they're alone in the school, you need to reach to them. Perhaps using them through a regular phone would be good. And when I ask my daughter, okay, if you really need to, then sometimes she'll make a statement, oh, I need to communicate to you. Okay, great. If that's the real purpose you want, then let me get you a phone which is not a smartphone. Are you okay with that? Oh, well, I don't want a phone. Okay, fine. So the thing is, somehow parents do it, and maybe their kid is disciplined enough that they're, not exploring things that they're not supposed to. I don't know. But I do find it difficult as a parent to answer to my daughter or son when their peers do have access to a smartphone and do those things. So what is your suggestion or thoughts on that?
See, one thing that's really could be helpful is education. Educating ourselves first of all. With all the detriments of using that. I know at some point I had to talk a little bit about this subject matter. It's been a while, and then so I had to do some research on it. And there's a show. What is it called? That show where they speak. TED Talk show. And when I started hearing that, I was so shocked. There was so much information there in terms of the impact these phones have on young children, and the young children speaking out on these things. How their life has become, how they've contemplated suicide so many times, how they've been under great depression for years and years because of these phones, because they're building identities. So, their own identities through these social media groups, and how they wish their parents had said no at the right time, And so when we educate ourselves and we realize the impact these phones have in terms of pollution of the mind and body and all types of different temptations, then we become convinced. Okay, and then of course we have to do it in the way that they can, they can accept. So then we develop different tricks of how to do it, But it's in one show he was saying that how you just have to do it. There is no other way. You just have to take it away because it's just so harmful, and to be given at the right time, like I said, later on in life.
And also I was reading, there is a website which talks about all these big leaders, like the owners of Google or the founders of Google. They don't give the phone, haven't given a smartphone to their kids until 17 or something. But they did this in Android operating system, but they don't give it to their own kids. And our kids get sucked into this.
I think
Right. Jobs also didn't give it to his own kids, he didn't give it. So our kids have to understand that it's not like we're depriving of something for them. It's just we're protecting them from this craziness, right? So that, because I do see that a lot of issues that is coming among the kids also because of the access to the phone. Yeah.
Yeah, like Prabhupada said, Gopal said earlier, it's like dopamine, when you are high on some drugs, and then if you don't have it, then you crave for it even more, and it creates so much anger issue also. There's a lot of anger that comes from using these devices. So parents have to educate themselves, before they can take any step. And when you educate yourself, then you just have to say no. It's never too late,
This covered it really well. Also, one study they found that children or youth who use the phone, and then let's say they stop using it, but if they use it for a long enough period of time, it actually changes their brain to where their attention span later in life won't be the same, because at that time in life their brain is developing. And that's why it is different in children or adults to have the phone, because in an adult, the brain is already developed. So if you use a phone, it may be a distraction for you, but it won't change the way your brain works. But in children, it actually changes their brain. And so the generation that's growing up with the phone, they will have less attention spans and less, they'll be less peaceful than the group of people who grew up without it.
I think they did some research where nowadays when people work at their desk on an office, they have to have a phone right next to them, They're working on the computer and like that, And how the productivity is a lot less now because of this, because the brain has been wired, because they grew up with that. Like Gopal is saying, if given early, then it does damage, permanent damage to the brain.
So Mataji, there is 3-4 questions here. So I'll finish my question. One question which I had was, most of the congregation devotees go to public school in the Seattle congregation. The question I had is, because you have experience of homeschooling, so now in this setup, the question is from all parents is, how do we inculcate Bhagavatam in our lifestyle? Do you have any creative ways? Because some cases both parents work, they have other extracurricular activities they send for different classes, and when they come home everybody is tired and nobody has energy to do. They take this as a task, not like as Prabhu is saying as a creative thing where his child is asking, I want Bhagavatam or I won't sleep. It's like everybody feels it as like a task to do that activity. Is there any suggestions on how to make it fun so kids can look forward, parents can look forward even at the end of the day? So if you have any suggestions.
So we will cover this, we will answer this question tomorrow, because that's what our topic is going to be, is how to introduce Srimad Bhagavatam to our children and the effects and different techniques we can use to introduce them.
Hare Krishna, Mataji and Prabhuji. Thank you for the very nice lecture. It was very helpful. So I'm 17 and I've had my phone, or like my phone was given to me at like a very young age, like around 12 or 10. I've had social media and everything. And I don't blame my parents for anything. I learned myself that social media like was kind of destroying me, and it like wasted my time and my brain was going into other things. So I'm trying to reduce my time on social media or just like phones or TVs. And with my brother, video games is his problem. So yeah, it's really hard now because now is like the age when my other friends are like starting to get their phones and now they're addicted to social media, so they think it's the cool thing to be on, and I'm just here like, no, it's not. So it's hard for me to get off while everyone else around me is like, whoa, that's the new thing.
So
Suggestions?
what is your question?
Is there any like suggestions or easy way? Because it's a really hard thing to struggle with.
It's a good question. I was on Facebook for I think a few years, and it was very hard for me to end it. But then one day I just ended it. So I closed my account, and then I found other ways, very nice ways to keep in touch with my friends and my community and all these things. And since that time, I've had more time. So. Of course, everything can be used in Krishna service. So we can also use our Facebook account in Krishna service. It can be a very wonderful way of advertising programs, events. So, one way maybe that you could gradually, change it is that you delete your own account, but then you make a temple account or some sort of preaching account, and through that you can, once in a while see what everyone's doing, and then also send out spiritual messages. So it's some way how we can spiritualize that knowledge and that community, that connection that we have. That's very nice. But yes, I mean, the reality is that most people have the phone and they have Facebook and these things, and the essence of our Krishna consciousness is chanting Krishna's holy name, right? Chanting Hare Krishna. That's the core of it. These things which we mentioned, these are more like helpful things that are good options, especially for those who have those options to apply in their life. But if we're not able to apply them, then we increase our chanting, we increase our association, we increase our reading of Prabhupada's books, and then these things then gradually guide us in finding the right solutions. That would be my short answer. Maybe you have something to add to it.
Yeah, I think that's
follow-up question.
Yeah, a good answer, because that would be, to me, that would be the only thing, is to increase your devotional activity to substitute for those things that you may start missing. Having been, I would consider you a very brave girl, an excellent example here in this community, because, to be able to actually consciously be able to give up something which is so addictive, and to keep and be consistent on that is really wonderful. And you can be an example to others who are already addicted and who can actually get the courage, to go back.
One devotee girl in Oxford, when I was there, she was also I think about 17. One week we had a weekly program. She came and she told us that she spent something like, I think her father was telling us. Her father and daughter always came together. Family came together. She spent something like 37 hours on Facebook that week, and she was regretting it herself. And that's why people say that these things are a little bit like drugs. Like, people take them, but they also know that they don't want to take them. So she was telling us, because obviously she didn't want to be on that Facebook that long. I feel that way myself also sometimes, with so many things. So it was 37 hours. So yes, it can be a challenge.
Hare Krishna. I wanted to ask how we can inculcate values in kids so that they use the internet to the extent required. because of the current education system, we are forced to give the internet to them, and they take it for a good purpose, but after some time they get drifted. So how we can handle that?
Otherwise, after some time, what happens?
They get drifted. They will be seeing something else. They take the internet with a purpose to do something, but after that they get shifted to something else. Monitoring them every time is becoming very difficult.
Well, one thing, so like you mentioned, now it's almost a requirement. There's one girl in Indianapolis where we live near that. She just started, she's 5 years old, and her parents just put her in public school, and by the public school they were required to buy her an iPad. So she's 5 years old and she walks around with her iPad and she has to like do homework on her iPad. And it was, I don't know, maybe Apple made an agreement with these public school systems, because they were required to buy a new iPad, even though everything else was paid for, but this they had to pay out of their pocket. So, and so that, it's necessary there. I think most of these schools, they do come with some software. I mean, that's actually the practical way, practical reality. They come with the child protection software. And in that software, of course, it's kids software where it filters out any websites, things that they should not be going to, like NetNanny and these things. There's a few nice softwares there. But also in those softwares, you have the option where you can limit the time of when they can be on the internet. And a lot of parents don't know this. So the software also gives the parents the opportunity, like you can limit, they can be there from 10 to 5 every day. But they cannot be online in the evening or in the morning when no one's with them. So of course our response is always also a spiritual response, the Krishna consciousness, all these things. But that you could say that temptation is so great that even if they're chanting, even if they're associating, still they'll do it, right? They'll still go to the wrong places. So either we don't do it, right? We don't give them the iPad, even though the school is asking us to. We don't give them internet, even though the school tells us to. And they can just use it at school. But if they have to use it at home, then we can use that software. And now there's very sophisticated softwares where the parents can put the password and restrict the times when the children can use it.
Well, also that we have to remember that giving them Krishna consciousness will also help them, to be convinced and be more submissive to these ideas. Because until they understand the value of, our advice, and why, and be able to respect them, then naturally the mood will be more conducive to helping them. If they're not getting anything in terms of Krishna consciousness in a sweet way, in a joyful way, then it's going to be harder for them to accept anything from us,
Hare Krishna Mataji. So I have a question in the same line. So I gave my son cell phone almost a month back. So initially when he used to ask for cell phone, I used to tell him, why do you need the cell phone? It's because you need to reach your parents. So I am always available in the home. So if you need me, just go to your school office, give me a call. I'll be there with whatever help you need there in case you forget something or things like that. But then he said that there are few teachers who wants us to do research using our phone while the class is going on. So I'm the only one who's left out. So, and if that affects my grade, don't blame me. So then eventually we ended up giving him cell phone. So is there a way, I know homeschooling is the best way if we want to keep them away from all these kind of distraction, but as I told you earlier, we tried for a year, but then he's back to the public school. So is there a way to, I know I cannot tell the teachers, but again, what is the solution for these kind of issues?
I guess it would be this similar response that, first thing, their experience of Krishna consciousness should be joyful, like my mother was saying, so that sort of takes over our life in a very positive way. And then secondly, we try to take as much precaution as possible. So sometimes on phones you cannot get these nice softwares. limit their access to different websites and the time period when they can use it. So maybe instead of a phone, you can give them an iPad, where in the iPad you can download these softwares. But I think on the phone you can also do it. There's also good softwares for phones. So that's one way. And another way is to actually speak to the teachers and actually ask them, how much does he actually need it at school? Like, what are the assignments, and are there other alternatives for it? You know, because like in the case of this small girl, there was no alternative. I mean, the school had a policy. Every parent, it was unbelievable, even for that parent, that every parent has to buy the latest iPhone, iPad. It wasn't even if they had the older one, the latest iPad, and they have to change it every 8 months. They have to buy a new iPad. It's almost like Apple made a contract with them to sell their iPads to them, and so there was just no way out. And so they do the best they can. And the simple point is, don't trust your child. Don't, even though we want to trust them for everything, but in terms of this, don't just believe they'll use it properly. Because they want to use it properly, but the device is such that it pushes them not to use it properly, right? So therefore, just load all the software on there that will protect them from it.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji and Mataji. In lines with the software that you said, just a tip for parents who do not know, there are apps like Family Mode, from example T-Mobile, where we can set timings or even block certain apps like YouTube, Facebook for the children, and as well as set them some time if you want to give like 10 minutes a day, or morning what time to evening what time you want to allow. Those things are available even on phones. And parents can even see like what website, what time they went, and all the history is available, just in case they want to avail.
Thank you for that information.
Prabhu, I have one question for you. So sometimes I hear from teenagers, I have a teenage daughter too, right? They say that you are grown up in a different generation. When you grew up, there was no internet, there was no smartphones. The way I think is different. So my question to you, I guess, as you are growing up in your childhood with the Krishna conscious background, do you ever felt that whatever you are receiving is, were you questioning that it was not good for me, or I am in different mood? Because I sometimes just get, is this conflict normal, or is it something is going up in this generation?
There were some times in my life when I did feel that perhaps I'm missing out on things. I genuinely, I felt that, and I maybe even resented a little bit Krishna consciousness, just very short periods. But I don't feel that way now. So the thing is, it's partly, and I didn't feel that way even a few months after I had those feelings. So partly sometimes it's just growing pains. And even if they had everything, they would still feel that way because there would be something else that they would be missing out from. So those are natural. And even in the best of circumstances, a person will feel that way because it's just human nature to hanker, right? Part of the mode of passion is hankering and lamenting. I wish I had this. I wish I didn't have this. And being still, being materially conditioned, even as devotees being materially conditioned, we still get these feelings. I missed out on this, or I missed out on that. But then later on you realize it's not so important. Just like a small child, they sometimes get very resentful why they don't get more cookies. My parents don't give me more cookies and more candies, and it's like they're so mean. But then once they're teenagers, they don't care for the cookies anymore. And then they're like, oh, I want the video games, and I want the this, that, and why my parents don't give me this or that. But then they'll grow out of that, and then they won't care for that anymore. But as long as it's not too much, like as parents also, one thing, as homeschooling parents, especially and parents in general, we can sometimes be also over-ambitious regarding our children, both materially and spiritually. Like we want them to be the smartest people in the world, the spelling bees of all time, or we want them to be the pure devotees, right? So that also we have to watch out that we're not over-ambitious with our children. We don't want to see them as picture perfect. It's like, okay, they can grow up with their flaws. they can learn from their mistakes, they can, even make a few mistakes. But we won't purposely help them make those mistakes. We will try to avoid it as far as possible. So there's also that place of compromise that, there has to be some real, not being overambitious is very important also. Any other? Yes, Mama.
Hare Krishna Prabhu and Mataji. So my question is, as you said earlier, that if you think you have given best, then you can just leave it to Krishna. I mean, in short, right? But then, at least in my case, I never feel that I have reached that. Like, how do you know that you have done your best? I never feel that satisfaction. Maybe because of my own shortcomings and not able to do certain things that I want to. So then, I keep thinking, when will I reach that point that, I'll feel that I have done my best?
So this is a very good question. Teaching, educating our children or raising our children doesn't mean that we have to give a picture-perfect life. In fact, they have to learn that this world is not black and white. There's many, many shades of gray, right? So we are not trying to give them a sterile environment. In fact, we are making mistakes, and they are also learning, just like we are learning from our mistakes. The children also learn that how, people can make mistakes, and they can negotiate those things in their life, So I remember that I would make many, many mistakes, and then we would sit down and talk about it. In the Srimad Bhagavatam time, we know that how I made certain mistakes and how we can, how I could have done it differently. In other words, the children should see that this process of Krishna consciousness is not, we're on the path of perfection, but we are not perfect, okay? So it's, and this is how material life is. We are not giving them a rosy picture perfect life. But yet we are saying that if you were to take up this process, you'll end up happier. You will always, they should always have this feeling that I'm really not missing out what they're doing. It's degrading. I don't want to do those things, They should have that sense. And then in the process, if they're making mistakes, they're learning from their mistakes, So no, you are doing what you're doing your best, and the children are, accepting it. And if you're making mistakes, they're learning through that also.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add regarding the internet filter. So there is a small device called Circle, which is I think 65 or 70 bucks. You can put it in home, and it is connected to your Wi-Fi router for the whole home. And then you have an app on the device, which is your phone, and you can control, which all categories you want the kids to, during which days, which timings, even those categories which are allowed. You have a full log, so you can see later on, which site did he visit to. So, that gives you a full control of what they can access during what times. Just wanted to share for everyone.
Yes, thank you. Are there any questions on the morning program, deity worship? Just to remind people some of the things that we covered. Prashadam, association, those things.
I have one question. So it's about literature, right? So it's interesting that day we are, like literature, the libraries, they are filled with so much of this. So on the one hand, it's probably as a devotee's family, we can turn off the TV. But now we have to fill with them. So the literature, Krishna consciousness, of course we have Bhagavatam, but some kids have taste to read it, some don't. Now it's difficult for as a parent to fill the books to read. So now they tend to gravitate towards other literatures. Especially the internet, I can put a filter, at least. But now these literatures, because I haven't read it, I don't know what is right, what is not right. So do you have any suggestions in terms of how to, I cannot deprive them at the same time, I don't know what that literature help them or hinder them.
Yes, the library can also be filled with books that are not good for them, these things. And especially in the modern world, that is the case. But if we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam with them, then they will have this spiritual ammunition to choose the right books and to do the filtering that you're doing. Right? So if we give the positive, then that will counteract the negative, or that will give the knowledge, that will give the higher taste where you won't want the negative. So there's no end to it. There's the library, then there's the outside world, then there's this. Like in every place, Maya is present everywhere. So ultimately, yes, the ultimate solution is to make ourselves inner, from the inside, make ourselves spiritually stronger. And part of that is also to help in that process. So we simply cannot depend on that, because Prabhupada says that material energy is far more powerful than us. So even if we're very strong from inside, still the material energy will take us over unless we don't have good association. So that's also, association, again association. So like if they're going to the library, it's not good to be alone for hours and hours in the library, even though it's a library. Because it's empty mind is the devil's workshop. Better they're there with their friends or with their parents, they're with someone, so that they'll, that being with someone always is very nice. It's like the Mormons, right? They always go in twos when they go door to door. They always go in twos. Because even you're out preaching the message of God, if you're alone, someone can take you, right? Or you can be taken away by something. Lord Chaitanya and Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda would always go together. They would always go in twos. And in this way they showed us the example how a devotee should always be, even when preaching, should be in the company of another devotee and go together. So yes.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have a question regarding the deity worship. So being the kids in the high school, they are having a couple of hours of homework every day. They sleep at 12 o'clock in the night, and by the time in the morning they woke up around 6:30, they have to rush to the school again by 7:15. So it's becoming very difficult to convince the kids that deity worship should be part of our life, which helps our Krishna consciousness. So how to convince them and make them understand that it should be part of life, and at least 5 to 10 minutes we should be doing deity worship every day with family together. So what are your suggestions, Prabhuji?
So I was thinking that at least you can do once a week, like on a weekend, the family and the child can get together and they can bathe the Lord and decorate, and they can do an arti. So at least they're getting something, because I know how it's so difficult during school days, because there's so much homework and so much of this. So during that time, you can just sit and chant, on a daily basis. You can do kirtan together as a family for 5-10 minutes. Now that's really relaxing, because music has that power, where when a brain that's been working, all day at school and, doing so many things, then when you come home and you play some kirtan on a harmonium or something, immediately the body relaxes. So that's something you do, And then on the weekend you can do something more serious, like that. Because Gopal especially had a great penchant for music, and that's how he would release his stress, Like go to college and then come home and play some music, So we can access these things,
Also, one thing I was going to add on that very often I hear this, that that like in high school or later grades, that the children are getting very busy and they have a lot of homework, and so there's no time left for spiritual life, or very little time left. And having gone through it myself, honestly, I don't agree with that. I think like when I was initially in college, that being very honest here, sometimes I would give my mother this impression that, oh, I'm so busy, all these things, and no time. And it's just, there's always time, because it's physically impossible for someone to study 16 hours a day. And I know I wasn't studying 16 hours a day. It's like then you waste your time in other ways, just doing other things, frivolous things, which is fine, but there's always time. The point is there's always time. Sometimes, kids say at that time, well, now they're busy, so they can't attend the classes anymore, the spiritual classes anymore. Yes, they are getting a little busier, but the other students are also doing it. And they're watching 2 or 3 hours of television every day. So why the devotee children who are sharper, why they don't have time? Why they don't have time? It's just an excuse. There's always 2 or 3 hours in a day. So when parents come to me and they say that, my child is now very busy because he's in high school and he's taking these classes and all these things, I just don't accept it. It's like, why is he so busy? I mean, everyone has a choice. The other kids, they're having fun all the time, and they're also getting straight A's. With so many straight A students I have, even in university, and they have time, and they do the things that they want to do. So why in devotional life we don't have time left? It's more just that age where, it's like, it's a convenient excuse to use that I'm very, very busy, and I don't have this.
I didn't say that, it's him saying that. So now I know the real truth. It's too late, isn't it? Yeah, so there was one episode that happened. Ganapati Swami, when he used to come one time.
Yes.
You want to give that?
No, that's it. Okay, but he came once, and I was going to college, and we were not coming for the morning program. So the temple at our home was adjacent to our home, so we lived attached to the temple. And so we were not coming to the morning program most of the days. It was, college classes, first, second semester in college. And so Ganapati Swami came, and while he was there, I think he was there like 2 weeks. I attended maybe once or twice Mangalarati. So towards the end, he came to me and he said, "So how's your college going?" And I said, "Yes, it's going really well." "And you're getting straight A's?" I said, "Yes, I'm getting straight A's." And then he said, "So in your material life, you're getting straight A's, right? A's. But in your spiritual life, what grade are you getting?" I said, "Well, Maharaj, immediately at that point, I understood what he was saying. So he said, well, you were up 2 days out of 14 days, so that's like about 20%. So in your spiritual life, you're not even getting an F, but in your material life, you're getting an A." So he said, why not balance the two? Like in your material life, you can get an A minus, and in your spiritual life, you can get a C or a B, right? So again, also the other thing is, why are we so ambitious in our material life? Why do we have to get that A? We can get an A minus. But if our spiritual life is good, that will still carry us much farther than our so-called A in our mature life. So that was a big lesson that I learned also, that he mentioned to me very artfully. So yes.
One of the experiences I've had when I'm talking to parents is that they engage them in so many activities, after-school activities, and they're going around, as soon as the child comes home, then they're really taking them to so many activities. Now some, maybe 1 or 2 is important, but to fill their whole day with, activities after activities, so that they can excel in everything, jack of all trades, master of none, right? So, then we end up losing that, they end up losing that energy, If they are in something like football, American football is so exhausting when children go for those practices like 2 or 3 times a day. What energy do they have left to practice any spiritual life? So we have to balance, and Prabhupada gives instructions on that also, which sports are good for them. It should not be very competitive sports because it agitates the mind. Sports should be in the mode of goodness, because children do need exercise. That's a fact, So we have to be very selective in what we, let them do. Not that we become overly ambitious and they have to excel in everything. Oh, Prabhupada. Well, he he talked about swimming, he talked about wrestling, and kite flying, and some type of Vaishnav sports he talked about. I can remember.
Like sports like football, for example, are good to avoid because they break the body. There's some danger. Like football, basically any sport if it becomes too competitive. I think that's the main principle that Prabhupada is saying, that sports is good and sports means competition, but if it gets too competitive, then it's a problem. Like one family actually, their daughter started to eat fish because her swim coach told her that you won't be able to win the swimming match if you don't start eating meat. I mean, she said, you're just too weak, and she actually started eating fish because of that. So that would be an example of too much competition, where even swimming can be too competitive.
There was another family, American family, across from the temple, and there was her eldest boy. She had 5 children, and father was not a devotee, so he insisted on the child doing football, American football, and he was such a good devotee, that child, and then very soon he started losing interest in spiritual life, and also his grades dropped because it was too competitive. He was always exhausted, So, I tried soccer for them, because I had access. Even as a homeschooler, I could go to public schools and have them join soccer there. And they did it for a few months. And then, they came back to tell me the type of language they were using on those fields in the changing rooms, locker rooms. And, it was really not, very bad. And so they themselves, they lost interest in it, So again, the association, when we're dealing with types of children who are talking all kinds of, things. So, so you have to see what is best. I kept them active in the temple. There was so much to do, and I needed them. So there was decorating and a lot of fun activities. They loved it, decorating and, cleaning, and, there were so many festivals where they had to help out, and there was so much physical going on, So we can engage our children in those activities, devotional activities, which does take a lot of their physical energy that needs to come. And what to speak of plays and dramas, because they're able to emotionally express themselves through these dramas, A lot of that is satisfied. The need for expression, the need for acting out, it all can be satisfied through spiritual activities. It's all there. We just have to be very grateful. And what to speak of this beautiful temple, there's so much going on, right? I'm sure your children are being engaged in different activities. Book distribution, Harinam, and helping out with different events, decoration, and
Yes, we should be involved in the temple. The temple is a very big part of Krishna conscious, the Krishna conscious experience. Because like my mother said, Harinam, book distribution, like these outdoor things also, the active things also are very important.
A lot of our success was due to the temple. Because we started out with a center, and then it became a mid-sized temple, and so many of their education happened through these activities. So temple was our whole life was centered around the temple. And that's what we can do over here also. Okay, I think we should stop here. It's way past the time, 20 minutes over time. Thank you so much, and then we'll meet you again tomorrow. Hare Krishna.